You're tuned into RX Radio. Movement prescribed. Brought to you by Prescript.com. A personalized approach to keeping you healthy and making your best even better. Your hosts, Dr. Jordan Shallow and Dr. Jordan Ginta.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of RX Radio. We've been shuffling around the order. We've had a few episodes kind of like up in the queue, wondering kind of what order to post them in. And I think this one's a really good one to have this week, kind of with the goings on of current events. First off, I hope everyone's staying safe, staying sane inside or out, wherever you guys are. Hopefully you can get back into training and kind of get back to some normalcy, whatever that's going to look like for you guys wherever you are. So kind of all disclaimers out of the way. I think this podcast is really good. I've been lucky, like super lucky, being able to connect with like a ton of people in this. I don't know. I'm remiss to use the word like industry, but let's call it industry for lack of a better term. And this dude is someone that I think you guys should definitely keep an eye on. And it's almost like, remember where you heard his name first, because he's not going away. And I think he's probably going to be, he's going to be someone that is going to be a thought leader in the fitness industry moving forward. I first got put onto this guy a couple years ago. Been kind of keeping a close eye on him and just what he's been able to do. And his physical ability is, I remember watching this thing once. And if there's anyone out there who's like a bodybuilder meathead, it was Kai Green. So again, if you're not into bodybuilding, this will be totally lost on you. So you could fast forward to the actual start of the podcast, but I think it's a worthwhile comparison to make. So Kai Green was talking about Ronnie Coleman in this interview. I used to watch YouTube videos of people training before I went to train. I don't know. I still kind of do it sometimes, if I'm being honest. And he was talking about Ronnie Coleman. It was like, someone like that clearly has like a story, right? Like no normal person just walks in off the street and says, I'm going to squat 800 for 10 or 800 for 2 weeks out from the Olympia. Like there's something experience that drives that process. And, for better or for worse, for good or bad, it's something that makes him really proficient at what he does. So like, he's like, yeah, I know Ronnie Coleman, but I don't think you'll ever really know someone that pushes themselves to that level. And that was like something that just kept that quote I'm paraphrasing obviously, but that sentiment like kind of just kept going through my head as I watched this guy train, again, just kind of through the keyhole of social media. So our guest this week is a dude named Nick Gloff. Nick is a bodybuilder and kind of an aspiring academic and coach out of the Northeast of the United States. And I would watch him train, and like there's, I've trained with the strongest guys in the world and, some of the bigger dudes in the world. And I've been super fortunate to do so. And this guy is, in his early 20s, and to watch him train is like, there's a story here. Like no one just does this, like, especially now that like things are in lockdown and you kind of see like people's true affinity for training. Like I know a lot of you guys that listen, I follow a lot of you guys on social, and, you guys are just making it happen. Now, this guy, when the world kind of went dark, he just went into his basement and got to work. And he is arguably the strongest 22, 23-year-old I've ever come across. And he's got a mental maturity to match that as well. So really, like, you see someone with that physical capability, and you guys know like that the mind is going to be at the helm and the forefront of being able to endure that. So like there's definitely a story there. And Nick was kind enough to kind of share some of that story with us on the podcast today. And we dive a little bit into programming, and he has a very complimentary viewpoint, and that's interesting. But I really think the takeaway is like, the cut of this guy's character and his backstory and talking about his childhood and stuff. I think was really a really good vantage point of, and proof of concept of this idea is, look, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So I'm really excited to be able to bring this to you guys. It'll be something that you'll probably see Nick on podcasts coming forward. Maybe if we want to dive a little bit more into the technical or dive more into the mindset, you guys reach out. and let us know. Be sure to follow Nick on Instagram. Seriously, like when it comes to good information in, you know, applied or application, he's on the come up. I think as one of the ones who's walking the walk and talking the talk. I think his comprehension around training is only superseded by his maturity and his mindset. So this is Nick Gloff. Sat down. He was nice enough to lend us an hour and a half of his time. I admire this dude. I look up to his work ethic. He's someone that I think is worthy of a tremendous amount of respect. And his professionalism and candor, I would say that he's one of the one of the coaches to look out for in the next decade. He'll be a household name for sure. That being said, some exciting news on the back end before we dive into the episode, guys. Prescript Level 1 course is going to be going live this weekend. So there's been a few ways that people can get on the sign-up list. So you can go to www.pre-script.com. There's going to be a little promotional pop-up that greets you as you land on the website. You pop your email in there. Or if you wanted to honestly just shoot me a DM, Jordan at the Muscle Doc, at the_muscle_doc on Instagram. Shoot me a DM with your email. And I'll make sure you're going to be the first to know. So that pre-sale list will be the first to be contacted. Sort of with the exclusive sign up. So if you want to get on to the next semester, we're looking at an August start. So first week of August, that'll be as we roll into the final semester. So that's going to be the next PSL1, Prescript Level 1 coaching certification course. And 2, it's going to be closing in on the last free month of RX programming. So if you want to get on, you're curious about it, get on www.predescript.com, go over to the RX programming and get your 1 month for free using code RX100. Without any further ado, guys, honestly, I don't want to muddy the waters of this one. I'm just trying to pay the bills. It's a really interesting episode. Make sure, if you like the episode, reach out to Nick. Share it over social. I think people like this need a much larger platform. He just keeps his head down and goes to work, and to be able to take him for an hour and kind of go into his mindset is really unique. So again, Nick, thank you for lending us your time. I hope you guys enjoy, and we'll see you next week.
So yeah, I mean, when you first start, like what was your like bodybuilding inception moment? Like I know what mine was. Like I remember, you know Fuad Abiad?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Fuad's from my hometown, and I remember he was training in the gym I was at, and at this point it wasn't the gym he currently trained at. So I was like, I remember walking upstairs and like seeing we had like these massage chairs. It was like this fucking corporate gym, and I knew there was a massage chair there. I just didn't understand why this human being was levitating over where the massage chair was, because I couldn't see the chair underneath him, and like there was these fuck off massive like Brookstone massage chairs, and I was like, where did the chair go? How is this human being so big? And then he got up, and I was just like, this is the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen. And I was like, ever since then, I was like, all right, I was training for like hockey and getting in shape for sports and all that. And I was like, well, that dream has died. I'm going to go follow this guy and do whatever he does for 5 years. And then I met my training partner, and then that was kind of it. What was your like, because you're still young. Like, I feel like I was your age when I started, and you're like, well, you're stronger than I am now. And I've been doing it for like a decade. What was the first like, oh, I'm going to do this thing now?
It's kind of unspecific for me. It's not like that, like one moment, like a lot of people end up talking about, like you seeing a massive human, and like most people seeing somebody on a Flex magazine or something like that, the most common one. I don't know, man. I went through when I was about 12, I started playing football. So when I started playing football, I was like horribly obese.
Really?
Yeah, like real bad. Because like when I was 10, I had appendicitis, and like long story short, I had this weird mental association between physical activity and pain, because my appendix was basically like on the verge of bursting throughout like an entire period of a day that I was just outside, like playing with my friends. So like later that night, like I was hallucinating in pain and stuff. And like, it was not good. I got brought to the hospital, and like basically as soon as I got in the door, I started seizing. So like after that point, it was another 3 weeks of intensive care, because it made a mess of my insides basically. So like when I was 10, I had that experience. And like since that point, after having that happen after a day of not doing, being physically active, like my young brain decided like, no, safety is doing nothing. So then after I recovered from that, I had the next 2 years where I was just couch potato. Like I did nothing. I just ate food and played video games. And that was all I did. And I was like, I mean, I'm sitting in a chair now. I'm 5'8", so I'm not tall by any means. But I was like 4'8", maybe 5 foot. And I was like, I had a gravitational pull of my own. Like I was circular. It was really bad. I could send you some pictures later if you want to put that up. But that I had a friend of mine in 5th grade that was just like, he was just on top of me. He was like one of the coolest guys on the football team, basically. It's like the top dog. Just like, dude, come on, come and do something, come play. And I was just that weird kid that never said anything in class. And like, that got me to do it. And then back then there was weight limits for what you could be for like playing football. And the weight limit for being a lineman, which was the only option for me, was to be under 125. I weighed 160. So,
okay.
Yeah. And children's sports for like football, because it wasn't actually a part of school sports. It was like a peewee league basically. So it was outside of it, but it was kind of connected. It was all summer. It was just summer basically. And then the games played into the fall a little bit. But over like the period of like 2 months, 3 months-ish, I had to lose all that weight to make the cutoff to play. And I did it.
Holy shit.
Yeah, basically just starvation the entire time. Ice cubes became my favorite meal. That and then salad with like chopped up chicken in it and basically just running. So that started this like, because of the success that I could see so quickly, because I had like had that 2 years, like starting with a catalyst that was a huge downward spiral in where my life was going. And it was just going down as things went on. And then I took charge of things and I was able to make that big of a turnaround that quickly. And then after I had made the weight and everything, and I had empowered myself with what I could do there, I ended up in the first year of me playing, being the kid that almost got laughed off the field on the first day. It's like after the practice was done, basically I died because I hadn't done any physical activity in years. But then they had the huddle up at the very end of the day. We all got on a knee and the coaches basically introduced themselves and laid out everything. And then there was like 3 of us really big kids. And we're always the ones that drop out after the first week. So he pointed me out and was like, hey, how much do you have to lose? But I weigh 160, sir. It's like, it just laughed at me and then said no more words to me and just went on with it. It's like, wow. Yeah. So like the combination of just like me being able to make some things happen there, having that, like my first hater. And then after that, halfway through the season, I got real lucky. I was really good at like being in the dirt and making some things happen. So on a lineman drill, I ended up breaking the wrist of the guy that had the position that I wanted. And I took his position. And then
this is the clear example. You make your own luck. You make your own luck by breaking people's bones. I love it.
There you go. That's the moral of the story. We could end here. But yeah, so like that happened, and that wasn't actually intentional. It just happened. But then I ended up being a starter on the team. And from there, I ended up taking charge of the linemen as the lineman coach, like basically the team captain on that side of things. And I wrestled all the way through school from when I was like young, and that took through. And just for me to have that extra edge and that little bit of a sadistic anger, like that chip on my shoulder that I had from having to push myself so hard and disregard all the negative feelings I had about either myself or what I had to do to be better. I just took it into my own hands and just made myself embrace it. And that just like repetitive beating my head against the wall and going, no, this is it. This is what you do. This is how you get better. So get better. So get better. So get better. And just over time, it just became like, how do I get better now? I just move bigger things. I get stronger than anybody else that I could ever see. And everybody in my general vicinity, I was like, okay, biggest guy in the gym's over there. What's he doing? He is right now incline pressing my squat. So what are we going to do? We're going to get there and we're going to bury him. And that was the start. And that was high school.
That's a weird time to have, like, I think most successful people have like some sort of pivotal like moment, but it's in like a foxhole in Afghanistan, or like when it's just like stuff goes belly up when you're 25 and you end up living in your car for a bit and out of your office and basically homeless. But at 12 years old, that's kind of like an interesting origin story to be like, and most people don't have the awareness at 12 to really see that as an issue. Like I was kind of a fat kid at probably 12, 13, 14. It was like I would be like the butt of the jokes kind of thing, but it wasn't like, I don't know, you kind of brush it off. Like I don't see that as like a catalyst. But to have like the awareness at 12 years old to be like, you know what? Fuck this guy. Fuck you, football coach. This is that okay? Well, I guess my question, like kind of a selfish pursuit is like now when you're training, and it's like I mean, obviously we're not in gyms at the moment, but like when you go and you look like that guy's incline pressing my squat. Well, you can't say that anymore because maybe if you train next to Julius Maddox, maybe, but I think you might have him licked there. How did the motivation start to shift? And I don't even want to call it motivation. Like, how did the discipline start to shift as you kind of ascended through the ranks? Like, you're looking around now, and dude, like, you got my attention because you're literally like, I would say you're arguably one of the strongest bodybuilders that I can think of. And you're probably like, who would we talk often a lot about Jordan Peters. His name comes to mind. Luke Sando, rest in peace. He was probably one of the strongest. But other than that, man, like the new age progressive overload kings, like I like the British guys. And Jimmy's pretty strong. James Hollingshead. Yeah. But it's like they're all kind of disciples of the Church of Dorian and Temple and all that. But it's like, where are you looking for motivation, or like, I don't understand. Like, why?
So, I mean, to go even deeper, because like, it's kind of hard to develop your own cross based off of being a 12-year-old and having to lose a lot of weight, you know? Yeah. I had, my childhood was a little bit hard. I mean, a lot of people's end up being, I mean, at least the stories we tell ourselves. So when I was just about 12, at about the same time, my parents split in a not so nice way. And my older sister is learning challenged. And my little brother was too young to know anything. He didn't know any better. So I was the most logical thinking human being in the situation out of everybody involved. So what ended up happening at the time was I ended up having to be a father figure for my older sister, who was 3 years older than me, and then my younger brother, while at the same time, my mom actually developed breast cancer. So it was, so I'm not going to go into the details of like the reason the divorce happened between my parents, but everything coincided at the same exact time. So there was a moment so a catalyst moment here. I remember vividly, I used to hang out with a good friend of mine, Alex. He was like my best buddy in the world, just hung out with him every day. His mom was like my mom. And there was one morning after I stayed over for the weekend and like all this stuff was happening at the time and it was like just started. She was driving me home and she just asked me, like, what do you think of all this? It's like, what do you mean? Like, because I didn't really think anything. So I hadn't put things together and sat on it. But it was like, okay, so what do you think about your mom? She's like, she's sick. She might die. And I just sat there silent for the rest of the car ride home. And I remembered like just looking out the windows, and it was a beautiful day. It was like a fall day, and just, it was like, I don't know, it's just one of those weird memories. Like I remembered that was basically when my childhood died. And like after that point, and then having to go through all the things that I did, being basically a father figure at 12, getting my own life together just by finding my own motivation to do something to be successful at, so that I could stand behind myself as somebody to listen to and somebody to respect, because that was my motivation in the first place. And then to become self-aware enough and aware of the world enough to understand people's personalities and how dark things can be at times. And there's nothing you can do. You just need to stand up. You need to look at it and just make sure that you don't crumble, no matter what it is that you had to do. When I had to be the impartial arbiter between my parents when they were angry at each other and they couldn't be in the same room because it was going to become a bigger issue than it needed to be, I was the person that had to do that. When I knew that one person did this and one person did this, I had to just go with whatever the message was, try to, move words around and be tactical to make things work so that nobody got into a fight. Like, it was just these life skills and understandings that, like, on the drop of a dime, nobody that you ever thought you could have trusted can be trustworthy when things come to an end. And just like anything else, trust is fleeting, just like life is fleeting. So you need to take things.
I mean, it's a good lesson to learn, and a lot of people don't ever learn it, and let alone learn it at 12. Like, I guess in retrospect, right? Like, it's a weird thing to ask, but like, are you glad it happened then? I mean, you were clearly on the better of it now. Like, I mean, you're someone that's garnering a lot of like worthy attention for doing something that you like to do, and doing it frankly better than most people that I ever come across. And this is what I do, is scour the internet and look at people who do this really well. But like, now that you're out the other side of it, like, is this something that you are glad that happened to you at 12?
Yeah. It gave me enough time for me. I mean, it took a lot of time away from me, but honestly, I wasn't doing anything with that time anyway. Because like the kind of kid that I was, like, I was very like reserved, like overly reserved for no reason. So like, I didn't ever try anything that hard. I didn't really push out to make like new friends. So like, I wasn't going out of my way to like be better for myself or to go and be a part of things. I was just always okay with, just existing. So in a way, it gave me a reason for me to be and to do things, whether or not I wanted to do them. But it showed me that there is a way to find a purpose. And then that purpose is what you make it. The purpose isn't just to survive after a certain point. The point is to make it through the wall that's in front of you that looks impossible so that you can see the other side. And that comes back to your original question, which is why I went through the whole story. What is my motivation now? My motivation now isn't looking at Jordan Peters and being like, okay, he's got 7 plates on it on a stiff leg deficit. I got to do that next week. That's not, even though I look to it and be like, okay, awesome, that's possible and I can get there. That's basically how I looked at that. What my motivation now, and it always was, it never really changed. I didn't even go to school for myself. I went to school because since I was 12, my mom had to work 2-3 jobs at a time to support a family that really didn't understand why she had to be away. So at the time that I had to make decisions, I had to decide I have to make it for this family. I'm going to make it so that everybody else can make it. And even now, that's what it is when I go and I train, because it's a vehicle that I can use for me to propel myself forward, for me to put my energy into a place that's productive for myself. It's something that I grew a passion for, so I'm going to pursue the passion with everything that I can. And then also it's a vehicle for me to move in a direction that I was originally impassioned by. And now I actually have garnered enough appreciation for beyond just doing the thing, that I appreciate what's behind doing the thing when you pull back the curtain, so that it's not just me going and being a meathead and moving things around. It's not me trying to be the biggest gorilla in the forest. Like, I'm trying to move to a place where all of that sure still matters. And it's something that matters to me personally, because I want to be better than I was. But at the end of it, it's the greatest vehicle that I've ever found for me to be successful in my own right.
And this is a question because, like, I don't know, I feel like we kind of come from similar places, and I could give an easy answer to like where I would be, because like your personality changes as you get put through stressful situations, but it's more or less revealed to you. Like, you are who you are, and then stress like it literally activates genes, and then you end up kind of becoming who you are. And it's like, I know if I didn't get into training and that was like a vehicle, like you said, like I don't know exactly where I'd be. And my pivotal moment was like, I was in like a hotel room downtown Windsor. I was watching a bunch of guys rail oxys up their nose, and I was like, okay, all right, we have some major life decisions. One guy was walking down the hallway, and there was like a Coke machine in the hallway of this like motel room in downtown Windsor, and he bumped out a key of cocaine on the little tray where the credit card went, or where the change went at the time, and he ripped a rail off of that, and just because it said Coke on the thing, and his buddy took a picture, and I was like, okay, all right, if I don't go to school, I'm gonna end up face down. And like, I wasn't like, I never got into that kind of stuff. I was just ran in really probably not the greatest circles. What would your where would you be now? Like I think people have a pretty good idea of how they would death spiral, like the exact route that they would go. Like, if 12 doesn't happen, or you just don't react to it the same way, like, where's 22, 23-year-old Nick now?
I think part of it's hard for me to answer because it happened so young.
Right.
So my exposure to the rest of the world and what my possibilities were was really limited by that point. So really, in a way, it was a good thing because I didn't see any other way forward. I don't know. I think at the end of high school and into college, it was more of an obsession, an unhealthy obsession back then, because I needed an outlet for everything that was going on for me. And it was less of a passion, I'd say. It was more something that I had to do compulsively, and I wasn't going to be okay if I didn't. And then through college, it ended up being something that I went to school for exercise science, not because I was particularly well read on it and I thought that was the right way to go, or that I thought there was going to be a good career path in it. I decided to do it because I was like, hey, I exercise and I hate literally everything else. So I went that direction and then just kind of followed the path. And in those first 2 years, they were pretty much the most crushing years for me. Just personality wise, because like you said, you get faced with stresses and it shows you who you are and it changes the way that you look at things. In those first 2 years, I was faced with a lot of mental health issues. And one of the things that kept me moving all the time was knowing that hey, I can go to the gym later and I can just go to the place and I can just do what I'm going to do and I can exert myself and feel alive for a little bit. And then that's going to make the day okay. So if I didn't have that, I can't imagine I would have lasted this long and would have been 22, 23-year-old Nick.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's weird. Were you the type before you trained? And I've just started doing this again, watching bodybuilding videos. I think that's kind of a stupid question, but I remember watching one, and it's Kai Green in the basement of some Brooklyn gym, and he's talking about Ronnie Coleman. And then I forget the context of the interview, but they were asking about Ronnie Coleman, and they're like, it talks something along the lines of like, basically Ronnie Coleman's not okay in the head. And this is pre-Ronnie Netflix. This is when Ronnie was still like, you know, it wasn't lifting still. Do you know the video I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Where it's like, he's sitting there and he's like, you'll never really know someone like that. And the interviewers can't quite wrap their head around it. It's like, no, I know Ronnie Coleman. Like, I know him on a personal level, but like, you'll never really know someone like that. And like, I heard it and I immediately understood it at, I don't know, 16 or 17. Yeah. But then they kept pressing. He's like, look, the guy put 800 pounds on his back and said, I'm going to sit down and stand up with this as many times as I can until I pass out. Or blow something out. And he's like, look, this makes people, like, for better or for worse, it makes them better. Like, if you're a cop, if you're a football player, if you're in the military, like this, whatever that chip is, like, that is the chip that's driving the machine. So it's like, you'll never really know. Like, and there's things like, I think to a certain degree, to push it to the level that you have at the age that you have, like that, I think without that, and everyone I think that I see, like every bodybuilder that I see or every powerlifter that I see, it's like you don't really know them, because it's like, man, the gravity of that experience that pushes you to do that to yourself. It's like you need the pain of lifting that much weight to drown out the pain of something else. It's like, fuck, man. Like that's where people like that don't understand bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength sports, like, you don't understand what you're looking at. Like, you don't get, like, that's kind of like it's an artful expression, because it's like, you have any idea how much that hurts? Like, I watch you lift and I'm just like, what the fuck is he doing? Like, if you weren't so massive, I'd be like, oh, this guy somehow, like, he's really good at Photoshop. Like, no, he's actually got those like that many plates on the bar. Like, it's cartoonish to watch you lift weights, but at the same time, it's like when you're actually watching, you're like, whoa, there's a story there. Because no one's just like, I mean, have you ever seen Dexter Jackson lift?
Yeah.
Dexter Jackson lift, and I've run into Dex a handful of times at Venice, and like he's one of my favorite bodybuilders when we think of like the outcome. Like, steps on stage, 46 years old, swept the Arnolds like 3-4 years ago, crushing it, not in a wheelchair, no colostomy bag. But it's like you watch him lift, and it's just like, oh, this is kind of just like a genetic thing. Like it's
uninspired.
Uninspired. That's a really good way to put it. But like, I watch you lift, I watch JP lift, watch like Jimmy lift and those guys, and it's like, who hurt you? What the fuck, man? Like, that is crazy. And it's like, when you can read between the lines. And I think that's where bodybuilding like gets a bad rap, is like, people don't understand what you're looking at. Like, I've been dieting for a week, and it's like, this is the shittiest thing ever of all time. I'm like 40% body fat right now. I think, and it's like, I can't wrap my head around it. Like, I just love the idea, as like, especially as I get older, like basically like purposeful suffering. And it's like, look, that's the whole point. That's the whole reason we're here. It's like, saddle up. You got maybe 80 years in you. It's going to be nothing but like raining shit and kind of trying to find meaning in it. So you might as well basically get to control your situation and pick the shit you got to deal with. So that shit's how heavy was that squat the other day? It's like
back squat or front squat?
Front squat. Don't even get me started.
Back squat was 675 for 4.
That's fucked. What's your body weight? Sorry, you're totally like meathead on this.
Right now, about 260.
That's insane. Yeah. Dude, that's like the most, like, that's very competitive numbers in a powerlifting competition. Like 675 for 4, you get you down to 242 for a 24-hour weigh-in, man. That's like upset. What's your best? Let's switch from the somber tones. Like, let's move more towards lifting now. Like, across the board, like what are your milestone lifts, squat, bench, and dead? And then I want to talk a little bit about programming from there.
Well, my best squat ever was that set, 675 for 4.
Really? Fuck, monster.
Yeah. I care a little bit more about my front squat than I do my back squat, personally. Front squat, my best was also 585 for 4.
Was that like a few weeks ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan, by the way. I know a lot of your lifts, which is crazy. What about pressing? Like, you're no joke. Like, I see you're like on the incline. What's best? I mean, this is what a lot of powerlifters that listen to this are going to care about, just to bring some some carryover and some weight to the table.
The last time I went for like an actual, like a flat bench press, a 1 rep was over a year ago, and I got 455, which is poverty basically. But yeah.
I wouldn't say you're not doing all right. No one's donating dollars a day to Nick's piddly 455 bench press. Well, training principles, man, because like you're one of the few that you'd identify more in a bodybuilding sense, right? That you have numbers that rival international elite totals in powerlifting. When did you start to, or what was your first like ethos built around like training? Like what was the mindset? What were the inspirations? Like, what do you gravitate towards? How would you define like your style? Because I think you do have, even in the space of like, you know, the progressive overload guys, like you do have somewhat of a unique style from where I'm sitting in the internet. Give me a bit of a run through of like the history leading up till now of like how it is that you approach training.
Well, I've been on every side of the equation that you possibly could have been. So I started off doing, like, when I first started training at all 10 years ago, it was basically like agility circuit stuff. Like, you remember insanity workouts way back in the day?
Yeah, I do.
I used to do those things, and I used to do like 2 of them a day. That's where I started. And then I like went through their progress up to like their speed agility ladder, like specialist stuff. And that was where I started, sort of. And then when I moved into a gym, and I started doing, like, after that was P90X, and I did that until I couldn't do that anymore. Yeah, so I'm not even going to get into that.
If this thing gets shared 100 times, I want you to do P90X in the living room. You would just, it's like some of it's on you would just break a couch. You would absolutely, like, if you had to like do a step up onto a couch, it would have to be made of like stainless steel. So yeah, back then I started there, and then once I got into an actual gym, because I couldn't afford to be in a gym, I couldn't pay for it. So the way I weaseled my way in was my wrestling coach actually owns the local gym. So we were allowed to get past the front desk to do cardio if we said that we were going in there and we were wrestlers. But I would just go right past and I'd go to the weight room. So I would start there, and I went in there to move anything that I could possibly move. So I started basically just looking for the heaviest thing that I could possibly move in any way that I could do it. And I taught myself sort of just kind of like internet scouring a little bit and kind of watching people around to see generally how they did stuff. So I kind of learned how to squat by watching other people. And then nothing I learned when I originally learned is still with me today. I'll say that. So I started off not having any guidance in it, and I didn't have like any actual good idea of what I was doing. So I was just watching gym bros do what gym bros do. But I got pretty good at doing what gym bros do. Just moving heavy stuff as many times as you can and then fist bumping the person next to you. So back then I started off just being a meathead and lifting super heavy stuff. And then I moved from lifting super heavy stuff to trying to lift super heavy stuff 1,000 times. So I went directly from basically, if I were to categorize it, it went from the home workout stuff into the heaviest, quote unquote, strength lifter stuff, power builder, whatever those bastardized words are, is basically what I was doing. And I did that for a year until I decided I'm just going to do more of this. So it ended up being a really high volume approach. And I was doing like 20, 30, 40 sets, like in a workout. And it didn't matter what it was. I had no concept of like how much one muscle could take. And I would do like 20 sets for quads. And it would be leg day, and I didn't want to be a little girl. So I just went, all right, quads. I'm going to do that first. I'm going to do 20 sets of quads. And then I'm going to do 20 sets of hamstrings. Then I'm going to hit calves. And I'm going to start off with squats in back squat, front squat.
I'm going to do the safety bar squat because we had one. We had a V squat, so I'm going to do a really close V squat, and then I'm going to do a wide one for my hamstrings. I'm going to do RDLs, and I'm going to pull from the floor, and I'm going to do I threw everything. Everything. I didn't write anything down in a logbook because I literally could not have fit it all on a page. And then after I started to get ahead about myself in like later high school, I started to refine what I knew a little bit. Got myself, I introduced myself a little bit more with like what Mike Isertel and the RP guys do. And I started to learn a little bit more towards that. I didn't really embrace it yet, but I kind of started to learn their principles, not in a super deep way, but just in a way that my feeble mind at the time could understand. Whoa, a bird just came and hit the window.
Oh, there you go. It's a testament to cleanliness.
Okay. And then from there, it just developed to basically, I know what's going to work because I've gotten this far by just trying to, when I push myself way too far, doing too much, I would regress. And then when I would just pull it back and basically do deload periods, where I would just pull everything back to basically one thing that I had to do per body part and just bury it, that's when I would progress. So from that, I just deduced that like, okay, this is the way to go. Get stronger, get bigger, that they come in hand, is basically my understanding at that point. And I ran with that for 2 years. And then I revisited back to the principles of like RP and like actual, like taking into account more than just load as a progressive method. And I started to understand a little bit more. I mean, I got a broader and deeper look at anatomy and physiology as a whole through my schooling. And then being unsatisfied with the schooling that I got, I went even more out of my way to learn what I actually needed to know for me to be effective. And I started to deduce like where it really was that the sweet spot was going to be between balancing volume on what body parts, what exercises you're able to do it, what is going to fit, what's not, how do you balance everything across a day, across a week, across a month? How much time do you actually have to do these things? What is your actual recovery looking like based on the circumstances you're living in? And just like, I started like just accumulating all the variables and all the what ifs. And then from there, going down every avenue that pointed me down to see like how far I could push any one of those variables at one time. And then drawing them back to see where I could push the other ones to see exactly where they would all fit in tandem with each other. And I ended up where I am now.
Yeah, when I watch you train, you do something that I think a lot of bodybuilders miss, and that's like the specificity. Like you lift with specificity that would almost rival a powerlifter. Like powerlifters are going to squat, right? Like they're not going to go in one day. It's like, oh, you know what? That safety squat bar looks pretty good. Hey, let's use that today. It's like, well, is your upper back and potentially quads a weak point? Then no, then I'm not going to use that. That's dumb. Like I'm going to do the thing that works. Where like bodybuilders, for better or for worse, but seemingly for always, they're going to walk into gyms and be like, oh, look at the angle of that. It's like, you have no idea what you're looking at. You don't have a fucking clue what you're looking at. You don't even know how to measure that angle or whether or not it's 2 pulleys versus 1. You don't know. You're just like, I've never seen that before. Shiny red ball. I'm going to use that machine. Where it's like, I watch you lift and even prior to lockdown, and it's like, okay, like you seem to stick with like a core few exercises and just hammer them. Mm-hmm. Like specificity, like to the point of like super specificity of exercise selection. Mm-hmm. How is it that you go to approach, like how do you prioritize, I guess, in order of like either muscle groups or movements? Like, cause everything I see you do is really strong. And then I'm like, all right, well, is everything this guy can do really strong? Like there's some machines and some movements that I'm weak at and I prioritize them. It's like, how do you maintain a system of checks and balances and manage fatigue? Like, your dumbbell rows are heavier than some people's bench. And it's like, that's, we can scale our ability to recover, but like at the same time, it's like only to a certain extent. Like you lift weights to a point where it's like, this guy needs to take a week off to the uninitiated. after he does single arm dumbbell rows. Like that's a ton of accumulated stress in a single set. How do you start to structure your program? Like I'm literally fascinated by the way you train, because it's like, how do you structure a program and manage that kind of fatigue and still lift more than twice a week?
I'd have to say to start off that I definitely have some sort of a gift for it. So that helps me. But I kind of peel it back to what's essential and try not to go too deep into the thought process, because it ends up convoluting the whole process and making things too complicated. So really what I look at is it's an organic process rather than trying to start off with a blank sheet and decide like this is where it's all going to go. Because of the data that I have on myself from knowing myself and training under my own programs for as long as I have and testing myself in every direction, like I said, I've looked at all the variables that I could possibly manipulate, and I've pushed them as far as I could possibly take them. And to be an example of that, I decided that I was going to spend an entire year squatting every day. So I did that. And I didn't even do it intelligently, because I wasn't doing it under like a special Bulgarian program for like, you just squat, then you go home. Or you just squat and you do that at 6 a.m. and then you come back and you do another set of squats at 2. And then you come back and you do it at 8 and then you go to bed. It was, I'm going to load up a bar with as much as I can possibly do for a set of 6. And I'm not going to stop and leave this rack until I get 50. And that's it. And then I'm going to start the rest of my training day. So that was an experiment to see exactly how far I could push my axial loading and still be able to recover. And I figured out that I could go pretty far. The wheels didn't fall off after a year. I didn't want to keep doing it, but I still survived. So like I basically up until now has all been experiments to see exactly where everything could be pushed. I know just about where my volume total can be for any one thing. I can push squats to be like 2 or 3 sets a session, no matter how much weight is on the bar. That's it. If I'm going to do a pull and it's within 90% of my best of a working set, not as a 1 rep max, I can do that twice a week for a set each. I try to do them 2 consecutive in one session and I'll be smashed. So when I take these experiments, and it might, even when you look at it from the outside, like I'm surprised that you see anything intelligent in what I do, because it looks from the outside, when I try to look at it and remove myself, it looks like I'm going through things haphazardly and trying to decide what I'm going to do on any one given day, like a normal bodybuilder would do. But it's more of deciding like, okay, off of this base, these variables that I know within a very small variation, this is the best practice. This is my spectrum through all of these. If these are all pull levers here across, if I know that they're all here, and I'm going to push one slider up here, one of them's going to have to go down. If I push this one here, this one goes in the floor. Where do I make these adjustments? And every exercise is going to have different implications on what it's going to do to the total system afterwards, and what it is that I need to be prepared for before I walk in on that day to do any one of those specific things. Like you said, it's not just, I'm not making considerations for, okay, I need to squat, and then everything else is an afterthought because it's an accessory. Because my accessories are just as much as an axial load as anything else. If you're doing a pull session and you can RDL 675, that's a lot of axial loading. You might be screwed after that. But if you're not and you survive, how do you get the rest of your stimulation? Because that's a global movement, but it's not going to totally hit the target that I'm looking for. If I were to go in and just do that set and then I'd leave, what would I be accomplishing in my actual goal? Because I'm not looking to power lift. And even then, in RDL, how specific is that to me actually pulling something off the floor? It's analogous somewhat, but the positions aren't the same. So that's not getting anywhere. So when I look at these things, I have to start with the base of what I know I can do. And then from there, when I choose the other exercises that I use for the specific purpose of whatever I'm using it for, I know that there's other analogous pieces that I can pretty much closely simulate the same thing. And they're interchangeable to a degree, but they're not all going to have the same characteristics anyway. So based on the things that I know are similar between things, and then the smaller things that are different between them, the smaller things that are different is what decides what I'm going to use at that specific time. And if I'm pulling a lever in another place, I'm pushing the slide and turning the dial, I'm making an experiment on another side so that I can see how far I can take it, then I need to know that, like, okay, this, because of this characteristic of this thing, this is at risk. How important is this? What is the adaptation I'm trying to get out of this? If the adaptation here can be gotten from something else, then I can make that substitution. But what of the vital characteristics of this is the reason why I had it in the first place? And then is it useful for me to push everything else to see if I could replace that, and then see if I can add in other things that will take up that characteristic on its own? Some things you can't do that with. Some things you can. So hopefully that kind of explains.
Well, I think of it this way. If it doesn't, it will at one point. Like if you listen to this now and you don't understand it, train for another 5 years and then you'll totally understand it. Because I think of this like, have you ever seen, remember like the 3D pictures when they first came out with 3D printing? And you're looking at this like, geometric-y kind of symmetrical weird pattern on a thing, and you're looking at it and someone comes like, oh, it's a spaceship. Like, how the fuck did you see a spaceship in that? And you're like, oh, you just got to kind of squint and then pull your head away. And then like you do it, and then one day you're just walking by it and you're not even paying attention. You go, oh, motherfuck, there's that spaceship, right? It's like, because like what I like and what I see and like, and the fact that, I mean, when you think, like, that what I see is first principles intent-based training. That's what I see. You understand the first principles of movement, like overarching meta principles that dictate relative joint position, levers, the stress of implementation. Like a dial movement here could be this hinge needs to go from free weight barbell to unilateral dumbbell or bilateral cable or machine, and you understand how that you understand how inoculated you are to stress based off running all these experiments. You have the top levels of, like, I always compare it to audio because I'm looking at a little bar that spikes when I talk, and then when I start to yell it hits up in red lines. You know what the weight and volume and overall stress of these exercises, where they redline, and you know how to sit there like a conductor, and this total output that's coming out of this box of a program is as close to 100% output that you can get and still recover from, right? Like that is literally what everyone should strive for. Like when people sit there on the bathroom mirror, and I'm guilty of this, and they write up like this beautiful mind 6-week progression, it's like, okay, you'll get there one day. You'll understand first principles intent-based programming one day. It's not today, because people get so lost in like, I like that you mentioned RP, like maximum recoverable volume and all that. And it's like, okay, but you don't, there's infinite drop-down menus of variations and alterations that you can make on any given day to, like, because you're trying to hit it so close to 100 that every decimal point of like, okay, I'm gonna add 2 reps there, or I'm gonna work at a higher intensity, cut my volume per set, do more sets. If I don't, the relative intensity of the one set's higher, but I can't perform another set. What's going to be the accumulated benefit? How close to that 100 can I get out of squeezing everything out of this exercise if I spread it across 2 sets at a lower relative intensity in a lower free or volume per set? Or if I blast it in 1 set, there's obviously going to be a higher volume for that set, but I'm not going to accumulate the number of repetitions. Well, how skillful am I at the movement? Do I need to practice the skill of lifting this heavy? Then I opt in for like, okay, I'm going to spread this across 2 sets, 3 sets as doubles or triples on like 6 to 8 minute rest and make sure they're spot on. Or am I technically proficient enough in this lift that I can drop the hammer on that volume in one single set and then carry on to the session? Like, there's so much to be taken away from that thought process. That is literally, that's the fucking mountaintop of programming. But seriously, dude, you laugh because it's like you sit there and you're like, yeah, ha, ha. But it's like, in the back of your mind that is like long term with programming, that is the goal. Like, that is 100% the goal, is to understand what I call first principles intent-based programming. Because it's like, it's like, like everyone would say, like, oh, like a pull's a pull. It's like, not really, man. Like, I'll do a set of deadlifts, and if I'm rusty, I'll think I did 4 separate exercises at 4 reps. Like, if my technique is not like, oh no, my shoulders weren't back enough, or I was leaning too far over my toes, and I'll literally like shake my head between reps because it's like, oh, opportunity lost, fuck. And it's like, how did the set feel? It's like, what set? I did 4 separate exercises. I did a single in 4 separate exercises. And it's like, people don't understand, like, to drive these adaptations, the level of specificity that you need. So when you describe your programming, and it's like, I'm only looking through a keyhole of the internet and watching you lift, but it's like, it's the only way you can do it. It's the only way lifting as much weight as you fucking lift. If you don't calibrate it down to like the decibel, to the frequency, to the wavelength, to the megahertz, to the tune that you need to, it falls apart. Yeah. Like, you cannot fly that shit that close to the fucking sun without knowing what you're doing.
General best practice doesn't work when you get that high.
Yeah.
It doesn't. You can't use the general programming that anybody else could use and get to the same place. If the potential that's being looked at over a general programming that's going to be looked at for prescribing for a swath of people, where it's going to be most accurate for most people, if it's not controlling for the best characteristics that that person has at their disposal, the things that they can utilize the best for whatever their personal bests could be based on their own leverages, what their skills are at the time, what they can actually access effectively, what they can recover from, what their personal, like, whatever they were born into this world having the ability to do. Those things end up getting lost when you look at just general principles. But like you said, you need to know all the what ifs. That this is a pet peeve of mine that keeps on getting to me. It depends might be the one thing that annoys me the most about the world right now. It depends is the worst statement ever. It's now giving a license to people that genuinely have no idea what's going on to be some sort of arbiter of information that goes, somebody asks a high level question. Well, it depends. Okay. So that's the guise of you knowing that you have the information, but you have so much information that you're not going to say it. Wow. You must be really smart.
Smoke bomb it. I love a good smoke bomb in a conversation. Like, whenever I see that, it's I was talking to a group. I don't know. It doesn't matter anymore. I suppose I've been inside for so long. I was talking to a group the other day, and it's the same when people say, like, I talk about like some anatomy stuff, and whenever I hear someone go, well, all the little stabilizer muscles, it's like, boom, David Blaine, that shit. Throw the smoke bomb, run out of the room. It's like, what? You have no idea. Like, I'll do an Instagram story questionnaire thing, and I'll have 45 minutes and I'll have answered one question in annoying 15-second increments. Well, I mean, if you're a female, it might be this. If you're a male, it might be this. But if you're young, it might be this. If you're old, it might be this. If you're old and female, it might be this. And it's just like, I have one guy who asks me like almost the same question every single week. And it's like, I don't know, it's non-specific. It's not really stimulating. So I don't answer it. But it's like, but I only answer like 4 questions a week. It takes me 20 minutes because it's like annoying 15-second increments going, oh shit. Okay. Well, what I was saying at the end of that was, but it's like, yeah, dude, I'm 100% with you. It's like, it's a veil of knowledge. It's a thin veil of the illusion of having knowledge. It's like, you need to know like the context behind it. The one thing I think you do really well that I've noticed that I think a lot of people should take note of is you, I mean, you talked about this as you started your undergrad, like getting a deeper knowledge in the anatomy and physiology, is making exercises fit you, right? I think that's something that a lot of people don't really understand, like, or like they say they understand, but when you watch the way they execute and set up movements, shut shut up, Siri. When you start to when you see the way you execute and set up movements, it's like, okay, this fits. Like, you'll prop yourself up, or you'll adjust the height of a cable or something. Like, that's something when I watch, like, that's a minute detail. Like, if I just stick this cable at the top, that's too much shoulder flexion to, really try and target the part of the lats that I'm trying to target with this movement. If I'm going to smash, lats at varying degrees and varying degrees of shoulder flexion, understanding that that's going to change the priority of recruitment versus horizontal and vertical, and moment arms leading to overloading fully lengthened or mid-range or fully shortened. It's like, that's the one thing that really stood out when I started paying attention to the way you lift. It's like, oh, okay, that's something going, because it's like general principles. Like, I always make the comparison of like when I talk about research, it's like, hey, how do you feel? Well, my head's in the oven and my feet are in the freezer, but on the whole, I feel pretty good. And it's like, that's what I see a lot of people's programming. It's like, man, you're cutting it right down the center, and you're leaving so much to be desired.
Yeah. Well, I had an idea there. You led me in the right direction. Brain lost.
What were we talking about? We were talking about customizing exercises based off of your anatomy, strength curves, resistance. Go.
Right. So that's actually something that I can give you a little bit of credit for. So you. So I actually, when I first started to get myself better educated with training itself, aside from just knowing the book learning, I actually looked to your good pal,
Benny. Gotta love him.
Yeah. So that was one of my first introductions to getting past the bro knowledge, and going and actually having the introduction to just thinking more about what is going on and the things that you can manipulate. And then obviously there was a bottleneck to how much that could get, because, Ben's got things to do. He didn't put everything into this program that you could buy.
Right.
The MI40 Extreme for X amount of dollars was
boom. When he used to say boom after everything. If you ever notice it, go back, watch a boom. It's like, what the fuck are you doing, man? It's like Siegfried and Roy teaching exercise selection.
Yeah. He's grown a lot as a guy. I really appreciate him. But anyway, having that first introduction kind of led me down the right path to start thinking that way. And then I kind of used that lens that I gained out of just looking at this, what can I actually do? Just abandon all the things that I was told originally, that you don't do this, you don't do this, you do this, and this thing is the way you do this. Leaving all that aside and just going okay, let me try everything. And let me see if this even remotely feels like it did it right. And that was the first way that I explored it, and just went, okay, is this okay? Is this okay? Does this hurt? Because obviously there's no point if you hurt, because there's a limited amount of runway. If you're doing something and it feels like your elbow's about to snap in half, then you just decide, this is just the way it is. No, it's not. And luckily I had enough influence at the time that I wasn't as hard-headed to believe that it was just fine. And I was led I was ushered just in the right trajectory for me to start walking in the right direction. And then when things got dark and I had nowhere left to go, I started building the path myself and started feeding myself with the information that wasn't as easily found. And that stuff that wasn't as easily found was, one, you and everything that you guys talk about. So a lot of it was fortifying my own thinking processes in the beginning, because being, an undergrad student that never accomplished anything is what I always said. Never accomplished anything, never really did anything that could actually get me any sort of authority, even to myself. So I always thought in the back of my mind, I could be right. This could be it, but is it? But always thinking that, but is it, is kind of where it's landed me now. And even back, because I talk in circles, to bring it back to it depends. That infuriates me so much, not even just because it's a thin veil of knowledge that people like to put over themselves so they can act like they're somebody that they're not, because it's now cool to be the scientific communicator, whether or not you understand the science you're trying to communicate, or that whether or not you understand what the actual base principles of whatever Instagram post that you just read that you now have ripped off to use, whether or not you understood that, you still did it. And then when you get questions in the comments and it depends. That makes me a lot less angry than the fact just the base principle of somebody deciding I have the answer and then not knowing the answer. Because you can know the tag, you can know the words that will get you that quick, like Harry Houdini, like boom, like done. Like just throw the smoke bomb and you're out of there because you said the one sentence that gave you the golden ticket out. It was the reason why I'm here talking to you right now, and I'm not on an iron lung because I crushed myself under a squat that I couldn't handle, is because I went out of my way, because I always had that little bit of cynicism, a little bit of skepticism that told me like, but what if you're not right? And then all those it depends, instead of just going, it depends, and then leaving it to somebody smarter than me to decide what it depends on, I would go and look to be like, what are all of the possible things that could change this outcome? What is every single thing that changed this outcome? If this is the center and this is the it depends branch, then what are all the things that makes this thing depend here? What are all the things and characteristics of it that make it depend in every other direction that it could have from there? Then understanding that it's not an answer, it's a tree. It's a tree with branches that extend into everywhere. Something that you couldn't fully fathom even if you tried to bring it all the way to the ends. And if you did, you become so arbitrarily knowledgeable about something that's unimportant that it doesn't get you anywhere.
You mean having a PhD?
Kind of.
It's literally like it's following the branch down to the end of a point of a leaf and then trying to tell me about the tree. Yeah. It's like, dude, you're so far away from the point. Like, I don't know, like, yeah, protein metabolism is cool, but you know what's cool? Lifting fucking weights. Like, that's kind of the point. Yeah. I find like the one thing, like I always think of, you know how they train elephants in like Thailand? It's like when they're really small, they drive a stake into the ground. And they tie the rope around the stake and a rope around the ankle. Now, when it's small and the stake's big enough, it can keep that elephant in the same place. But it's like, good fucking luck tying, unless this thing is augured 40, 50 feet into the ground, good luck keeping an elephant on a stake. But you can, because the elephant learns that at a young age, the limitation of its ability to roam is going to be holstered by this rope tied to its ankle, tied to the stake. The stake in the ground, like if this thing fucking sneezed, the thing would come out. But I feel like a lot of people, I think a lot of people succumb to like the social hierarchy of like, well, this guy has this credential or this chick has this many followers or whatever, and go, okay, I always think of the expo, right? And like I would go to like, what was the first expo I went to? Maybe like San Jose Fit Expo or LA Fit Expo. And I clearly just realized, like, okay, this is how the fitness industry works. It's what side of the booth are you on? What side of the booth are you on? If you're on the other side of the booth, doesn't matter what you're doing, what you're saying, you are an authority. And if you're on the other, like if you're on the side of the booth that's sitting there waiting in line to, shake the hand of Jerome Hollywood Ferguson. I mean, I like Jerome, but at the same time, it's like, it's not 1992 anymore. It's like, and to get free pre-workout, it's like, okay, that's the clear division. It's like, these are the two camps. And it's like the people on the other side of the booth, the people that people are lining up to go see, it's like that those are the people they are the stake and tether that is holding back. Like, because they're all doing this, very non-specific, broad brush, like, well, that depends. That depends. And, maybe one day, when you understand that your ubulus connects to your upper dorsimus and all that, you're like, what the fuck are you even saying? It's like lending some context to that, I think it holds so many people back. Like it is like a proclamation of like an inferiority complex that I think stifles so many people's potential. It's like, look, you want to be scientific? It's like, all right, you got a subject, you have methods, you have a hypothesis. go on, test and retest, my friends. Like that's science. Like you reduce like conventional science when you're using like randomized control trials. It's like you're almost taking the value proposition out of the thing that you're actually trying to test, because it's like if there's one thing everyone has, it's incalculable variables. So when you calculate these variables, you change. That's like trying to sight in a rifle, and rather than actually changing the lens on the scope or the angle of the stand, you just start moving the target. So then wherever the bullet is off, you just put the target there. It's like, that's not how it works. You're not going to be like downrange or overseas and be like, hey man, I'm shooting at you. Could you move it a little bit to the left? Oh, thanks. And then Chris Kyle someone, right? Like you can't do that. It's just, it's such a like a subliminal narrative now that like people don't even know what's happening, and it's probably the most widely perpetuated way that people stay on that safe side of the booth. They stay on the safe side of that expo booth where they're seen as an authority, and it's like it's almost like you remember the first generation iron. Fucking hate generation iron. God, they're the worst. Yeah. I remember. It's they just suck. Like I just the stuff they put out. It's like you want to talk like I joke about Gymshark, but like you can't really joke about Gymshark because Chris Bumstead's sponsored by him, and I think Bumstead's a sick lifter. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like Generation Iron's what's wrong. I don't know, whatever. Fuck it. There's like 4 people who know what that is now, but it's trash media. But Phil Heath kind of said like in the first one, like if you want something that you've never, and it's an old saying, like you want something you've never done before, you have to do something you've never done before. But it's like if you want something that no one's ever done before, you're going to have to do something that no one's ever done before. Right? And I think that paradigm of like, oh, I'm just going to go online and download a free program. It's like, all right, it's the city bus of lifting weights. It's like you're going to end up in the same place as everyone else, and you're not driving. It's like, what the fuck's the point of that?
Yeah, yeah, and that's something else too. Is that this? Well, to start, science is no longer science in this field because everyone's a science communicator, and the actual people that are the arbiters of science in this industry, like the people like Brad Schoenfeld, like one of the most published authors in this space ever since it started. Like you could look at the comment section for him and it's just the most unbiased, just bashing of everyone that comes into the comment section. Because it's factual information and it's not opinionated. It's just, this is it. This is what we know. I'm not going to tell you that this is right or wrong, but this is what we know. And this is why what you said is not what I said. Basically. But now, instead, if you look at even to take your expo, because that makes a lot of sense. And I actually never thought about the expo that way. That's a really great analogy, but an even better one. Instagram is the expo. Every one of our pages is a booth. All of us. As soon as you put up a picture or a video, and then you put up the words underneath it in the caption, you are essentially at the same, you're sitting at the same side of the booth that the person that is supposed to be that's trying to give to everybody else, to feed into everybody else and be the celebrity, be the person that has the key, has the information. You can't do that if everybody's doing it. You can't do it if everybody's saying the same thing, but it's been put through the telephone line so many times that like Brad Schoenfeld said it first, and then by the end of it, it ends up being something basically the opposite of what was said, which is what we're now getting. And it's becoming now, instead of it being an actual, it would be different if it was a collective pursuit of us moving in the right direction. Because maybe if we were at large, a population of people that actually cared about each other in the direction that we're all going, maybe that would be the case. But because we're all basically just the aggregate of the most self-interested humans on the planet, this giant group of people are just clamoring to be the person in their town, basically their followership, to be the one with the answer. Doesn't matter if their answer was right, but they're going to stick by it to the death, which is definitionally against what science is. Science, for the entire time that we've had it as humans, as things with a brain large enough to comprehend that it has its own brain, we've been looking to find the reason why we're wrong. Every study is us going, this is what we think. We're doing this specifically to see if we're wrong. And then you change the characteristics of the test to see in what direction can you push it along so you're a little bit less wrong this time. No longer the case when everybody's trying to be the person that's making the scientific breakthrough and has the answer, when we're all just looking to be right. No one is right. No one. So now there's the it depends. It comes back again. The it depends every time is you finding a way for you to be right no matter what it is that the next person says to you. Because it's this hubris that we get from feeling like we have the answer that just is it's so powerful that we can't shake it anymore. And now that we all have our own expo booth, that at any point in time, at any day, we can just proclaim from behind our booth of authority that everyone in the lines, in the crowd of people around us is just going to listen and just go, here, here. Fist emoji. There you go. You did it.
I think the one thing that you do really well is, because for me, it's like you always got like, it's going to sound weird, but it's like you got to keep it gangster. And the most gangster play of all time, it's like it's like the training day. It's like it's not about what you know, it's about what you can prove, right? And like that's when like the 585 front squat comes into play, and that's when the 675 for 4 back squat comes into play, and the 270-pound dumbbell row comes into play, because it's like I look at like evidence is evidence research is a part of evidence. It is not like the overarching ubiquitous term. They're not synonymous terms. They're it's one small subset of fuck off Siri. But a lot of people are conflating in the same way, like when Shreds was coming up, and then everyone's like, oh my God, can you believe they're taking steroids and photoshopping and to sell proteins? Like, shut the fuck up. Really? Human beings are being disingenuous to their own gain. I'll believe anything. And it's like all they're doing now is they're massaging research to, like you said, make themselves right. Like they're changing the fundamental framework of science with a confirmation bias and being like, all right, well now I can spin up an infographic and now I can sell something on the back end of it. It's like a revenge of the nerds kind of thing. But it's like you gotta be able to bring it, right? Like the proof is in the pudding, and it's like, to be scientifically based, and there's merit. Like there's guys that like I've trained with that they'll tell you like, look, I don't care about like the science side of it, but and like they have genetic predisposition to looking a certain way, but like in an experience side, it's like they got quadruple PhDs. Like any IFBB bodybuilder has gone through enough. Like, and yeah, there's some that are less intelligent than others. Like there's some that have been in diabetic comas because they crank the sling a bit too high or something. It's like, well, look, that pain is knowledge really fast, and you learn the difference between 10 IUs and 100 real quick, right? Like you'll learn, don't draw that. And it's like that's valuable because Brad Schoenfeld, I don't think could tell you what that feels like. Just like you can't, like someone can't tell me or tell you, or most people can't, what a 585 front squat feels like. And it's like, that's a PhD. Like that in itself is a credential that like it'll take someone, undergrad, master's, PhD, 8 years, maybe. Depends on who your who your advisor is. It's like, how long does it take you to go from, 165-pound Violet Beauregard of alignment at 12 years old to front squatting 585? Well, it's like 8, 10, 12 years, maybe longer, maybe, and some people will never reach it. That's the thing. Like you pay enough money and you just pay attention, like you can get a PhD. Like it's not terribly difficult. Yeah, dissertations are annoying, and defending a thesis is kind of like, well, fuck these people. Like, what do they know? They're old and literally sitting at the kids' table of this thing. But it's like you can get through. Like I know like a ton of PhDs, And I've never met anyone who has never completed their PhD. And I'm sure they're out there, but it's like, I know less people that have not completed their PhD than I know people that can front squat 585. Right. So it's the same. And the pendulum will swing, man. The tide will go out on the education once it gets more common knowledge that people are just using it to their own gain. And then the tide will start to swing back to hopefully, circumambulate to a center point where we can almost create like, look, what is your front squat and how many years of schools do you do? What's your body? And create an intelligence coefficient in the fitness industry. It's like, all right, this is your score, based off the fact you front squat more than anyone and you have this degree and this is your trading value. And that's the problem with the fitness industry. The trading value is based off of social media leverage, right? Like it's like a social stock market where it's like, oh, what's so-and-so trading at? It's like, oh, he must be valuable because he's up 10,000 followers. It's like, not really. Right. But that's the currency that we start to play in. But I think it's
changing rules of engagement too, because rules of engagement change the game anyway, because it's not actually about what is going to be most engaging for the person that's actually looking for information. That's part of the big issue too. And I think that's also part of the reason that we have such this wild swing in any one direction in one time. I feel like, I haven't been around for that long. I'm still a kid, but in the time that I've seen the flow of information change, instead of it being like a couple of years where something's in vogue in the thing, it's now like you have like a 6-month period where like nobody knew about it. Everybody knew about it. Everybody did it. Then everybody hates it.
Right.
Then it's on to the next thing. And it's not this long drawn out process where anybody actually had the time to go through actually doing the thing for it to have shown them anything of value. And it's not getting anything in, like no information is being passed that we don't know, like that we didn't know before, unless it was from somebody that's gone through the process themselves that wasn't advertising it in any way to garner followership or to get engagement, to go and decide like, okay, this was the direction and I followed. There's people like you that do that. The reason why you have people that follow you religiously like they do, and you have such a strong group of people that do follow behind you, is because it doesn't matter if you didn't follow the algorithm. You didn't follow the 6-month period where you said one thing and by the next 6 months, you're going to have an entire different story to tell. And up until a point, you didn't put out information that you knew that wasn't going to be like your RX program, which definitely buying into that one. And I suggest that everybody on here, I'm going to advertise it for you.
Wow, company, man.
Everybody, do it right now. Pause this. Go buy yourself in and get access to this man. Okay? But it's people that go out of their way to bear the cross of what the things that they know that they can't know yet, and go and follow it until they find their answer, and not advertising it to the world until they have. Because it doesn't, when you're sitting there and you have to do this and follow that path that you don't know where it's going to lead you yet, you start advertising it. It's like it's the meme of I'm working in silence, but you still posted it on the gram.
Right. Oh, love that. The irony is just like, mwah, like it's so preposterous that you can't see what you're doing. It's, yeah. I look at it almost like things that are like radioactive and like things that have really long half-lives. Like you can't go back to Chernobyl for a really long time. Like, because the core of that is so strong, and it's strong because the half-life is so long, right? Like the half-life is going to be, I don't know, maybe like the next, after we wipe ourselves out, another, maybe Chernobyl could be like a bustling metropolis. Not that it was anywhere to really visit beforehand, but it's like things that are timeless are things that, like, I always look back at the guys like Charles Poliquin. He was talking about cluster training before research on cluster training ever came out, because he was training this way and putting people onto the Olympic podiums. And it's like, oh, okay, like that, and to this day, the core of that principle still remains, and it's still strong, right? Where it's like, I feel like we're trying to come up with these new base elements, and these new base elements are so fleeting and peripheral and so weak in their core that their half-life is so short. And the half-life is so short, and you can see a thought process dwindle through its life cycle and have a little flare of social interest. And it's like, if you don't have a strong core, that won't radiate for any length of time. The half-life is short, and then we start to see just almost an exponential decrease in the half-life, because it's like the social filter that you're pushing it through with so much pressure that we're actually speeding up the filtration process. So it's like, and it's a hard part too. Like it's a fairly rewarding pursuit if you can strike, but like I'll still have people that go back and like stuff that before I even knew what like a DSLR camera was, and I was like talking super fast in front of a whiteboard in front of my office, people still like go back and like share those things. It's like you want to create or relay something that can be like timeless, right? Like, you know, body weight programs. It's like, okay, if you make a good body weight program and you work with athletes or something, like that's fine. Don't make an at-home Armageddon program, COVID program, because like that's not timeless, right? That has a very weak core to it. That is not going to radiate and resonate long term. So it's just, I mean, we are, and I'm sure this is the same in every industry. It's like, this is human behavior played out in the fitness arena. If we could be sitting here talking about bearer bonds or real estate stuff or whatever, and it's like we could have the same shithead people doing the same thing, and like a select few people who kind of respect the craft or the art of it and be like, okay, like here is where we want people to gravitate towards.
Yep. It's trying to explore a forest with a pen light in the dark is basically what this is. Seriously.
Right. Or the flashlight on your iPhone. Hey, look, that's us. That's like, where the fuck are we? What are we doing with this thing?
That's too strong. That's too strong. Pen light.
Yeah.
Walking in the dark in a forest that you've never been in is basically what's happening right now. So you have the radioactive, the half-life as your example. The way I see it, even though that's accurate, is what's happening is because there's people, like bringing it back to you, people like you that followed the path. And you didn't start screaming about the path until you found your destination. Or at least you found enough on that path for you to report back. What's happening now is everybody's exploring this forest. They're taking it upon themselves instead of listening to the people that went the distance already. And then every time that they see something on the ground that looks like a path, they start to follow it and they proclaim to the world, I found the way. Oh my God, I found the way. They take one step, they report back. They take 2 steps, they report back. They take 10 steps. Maybe they get lucky and they start walking for 5-10 minutes, 5-10 weeks. And then they report back and go, oh, I'm lost. But the hubris doesn't allow them to say that.
Yeah,
and then there it goes. And it's just the same repeated bullshit that never had any basis in the first place because they got lost in the woods and they didn't want to explain to the world afterwards that, oh yeah, I didn't actually know where I was going. I just went where I went and I didn't know. So I just went with what I thought was right. And at this point, it's too far to abandon ship. So if you're on the ship, we're going to keep going.
We're just going to Titanic this bitch. We're just going to go down like the captain. We're sinking with it. What's on the agenda now? Like, I mean, you're in a position that I think is fairly unique as you're so young. And I think frankly, just leverage your ability, which is obviously to me, proof of concept. Like, there's no point in, I think, projecting what like social media is going to do, but what are kind of next steps for you on training and education and all that kind of stuff?
Well, part of my plan moving forward is, I don't know if our preamble, our talk before this is being put into the podcast anyway, but after the bachelor's degrees that I finished on Tuesday, thank God, thank God those are over. But now that that's done, I'm taking some time away from traditional academia because partially I just don't even know where I want to go. I've considered doing PT. I've considered doing chiro. I've considered doing a master's and PhD in exercise science or in any specific field that I wanted to go into. Maybe applied biomechanics, which is kind of the direction that I think in, kind of the mental direction that I kind of the lens that I look at everything through is more that way rather than looking at physiology or nutrition or like any of those other subsets that are more popular routes that have actual established places that you could go for a job. My final semester of school, I had an internship in a place that was pretty unique that had like basically everything under one roof. And I ended up learning that basically none of it. There's PT there, there was performance there was, it ended up being more of a headache than it was anything else. So I'm more thinking in the direction of right now, because like you said, I'm in a different position than, I couldn't have thought myself to have landed where I am now. Honestly, I didn't think I'd be sitting here talking to you. I didn't think I didn't think that I'd ever have the opportunities. Like if 6 months ago I was told that I had the opportunities now that have fallen in front of me in the last month, 2 months, I would have said you were completely crazy. So I can't talk too much about some of the things that are happening for me, but there are some things that I'm going to be working on that are going to be made more public soon that, at least for the time being, are going to take me in a direction that I think is worthwhile. And then from there, plan after being so burnt out from normal academia, taking the time to go and just live life a little bit and get some real experience. So I actually have a worthwhile lens to look at the education through, because I've spent the entirety of my life sitting in classroom being talked at. I'd like to go and be in the world to see from the actual inside rather than being kind of like at this weird in one foot in, 1 foot out in this industry where I'm going to be spending most of my life. Kind of being in that weird position I've been in for so long. I think it's time to just dive in and see what's here and get my feet wet with everything, and then decide from there, like after that point, it's going to be an emergent process. And where I go is going to be decided by whatever it is that my life turns into. And I think that's a smarter way than me trying to dictate where I should go with my 22-year-old brain that knows not enough for me to decide what my entire life should look like yet, in my opinion. So
I think, for me, it's like, I'm excited to have this like kind of archived, and like, I don't often save the videos of these because it's just an audio podcast, but I'm actually purposely saved the video for this. So like in 6 months to a year, like where you end up, wherever it is that you're going, I could be like, hey, this is like a year ago. Cause I don't know. I just, in the last, I don't know, man, like a year, maybe just kind of watching like your progression and your training and your thought process. Like it's been pretty cool. So I'm excited to give people a quick rundown. Like I don't do the thing where I'll intro you after and I'll pump your tires and all that. But for those, like, and I'll put the Instagram handle, but do the thing where it's like, oh, like this is where you find me and all that stuff. Cause it's like, I think I don't give a seal of approval to many people. And for what it's worth, I'm just a cynical prick like anyone else. But like, I think the stuff you do, man, is really on another level. So where can people kind of find you and to kind of keep an eye on what you got coming in?
Basically, just go to my Instagram. Everything that you need to know about me is going to be there, or it's in my link tree. So
at Nick Gloff on Instagram. I'll put it all up in the show notes. Man, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. This is long overdue. And yeah, guys, like I don't believe in many people, like myself included, but Nick is someone, like, you're definitely someone, man, that like you got, especially at your age, which always blows me away, and more so from a thought process standpoint than an actual application standpoint, which is saying something because you're so fucking strong. Yeah, it's definite like nod of approval, man. I'm excited to hear what you got going on.